Inside a convent in the small town of Città di Castello, Italy, visitors still come face to face with the body of a nun who died nearly 300 years ago. Resting inside a glass coffin is a woman whose body has been declared to be incorrupt. But according to historical accounts, the most disturbing part of this story was never the condition of the body itself. It was what physicians allegedly discovered inside her heart during autopsy. When the nun died in 1727, church authorities were already deeply divided over her. For decades, she had claimed to experience terrifying mystical phenomena, visions, violent ecstasies, and wounds resembling the crucifixion appearing on her body. Some believed she was a living saint. Others feared deception, hysteria, even demonic influence. Church investigators spent years examining her claims while she was still alive. When she finally died inside a secluded convent in Città di Castello, physicians and religious officials gathered around the body searching for answers. What they reported finding stamped on her heart during the autopsy would spread across Italy and become one of the strangest stories in Catholic history. To understand what really happened inside that convent in 1727, we first need to understand the woman at the center of the mystery. Her name was Saint Veronica Giuliani, and her story is one of the most controversial and bizarre stories in Catholic history. Long before her body would be placed inside a glass coffin, before the investigations, the alleged Stigmata, and the strange autopsy that made her famous across Italy, Saint Veronica Giuliani was born as an ordinary girl named Orsola Giuliani in the year 1660. She was born in the small Italian town of Mercatello, then part of the Papal States. According to later accounts, unusual religious behavior appeared very early in her life. As a child, Orsola reportedly became intensely drawn to the suffering of Christ. While other children played games, she spent long hours praying alone and meditating on crucifixion scenes. Family members later claimed she displayed extreme emotional reactions whenever she heard sermons about the Passion of Christ. But her childhood was also marked by trauma. When Orsola was still very young, her mother died after a prolonged illness. According to religious biographies, her dying mother gathered the children around her bedside and symbolically entrusted each one to one of Christ's wounds. Orsola was assigned the wound of Christ's side. The moment would permanently shape her spirituality. Years later, Veronica would claim that from childhood onward, she felt mysteriously drawn towards suffering, sacrifice, and identification with the crucifixion. As she grew older, her behavior became increasingly intense. Accounts describe fasting, sleeping very little, self-denial, and obsessive religious devotion. Her father reportedly became alarmed. Unlike many saint stories where parents eagerly support religious life, Orsola's father initially resisted her desire to enter the convent. Some accounts claim he even attempted to arrange a marriage for her, but Orsola refused. At just 17 years old, she entered the Capuchin convent in Città di Castello and took the name Veronica. The choice of name was symbolic. Saint Veronica, according to Christian tradition, was the woman who wiped the face of Christ on the road to Calvary. It was an early sign of the identity the young nun would build her entire life around: union with the suffering of Christ. Inside the convent, however, Veronica did not become peaceful or serene. The strange phenomena surrounding her life only intensified, and before long, the other nuns began witnessing behavior that would eventually draw the attention of physicians, bishops, and church investigators from across Italy. Inside the convent, Veronica quickly developed a reputation unlike the other nuns. The sisters reported that she would suddenly collapse into ecstatic states during prayer. Sometimes she appeared completely detached from her surroundings. At other moments, witnesses claimed she screamed, trembled, or wept uncontrollably while meditating on the crucifixion of Christ. The phenomena became impossible to ignore. According to convent records and later testimony, Veronica claimed to experience visions of Jesus and the Virgin Mary, attacks from demons, supernatural locutions, and overwhelming mystical experiences connected to Christ's suffering. But not everyone believed her. Within the Church, mystical claims are generally viewed with suspicion. The late 1600s was a time when Church authorities had become increasingly cautious about supposed visionaries and mystics. Fraud, emotional instability, religious hysteria, and even demonic deception were all considered possible explanations. And Veronica's behavior was becoming more extreme. She practiced severe acts of self-denial. She fasted intensely. She reportedly used painful penitential devices on her own body. Some witnesses claimed she appeared obsessed with suffering. Then came the event that changed everything. In 1697, Veronica claimed she received the Stigmata, wounds corresponding to the crucifixion of Christ. According to the accounts, marks appeared on her forehead, feet, and side. The claims immediately triggered alarm inside the convent. Church authorities launched formal investigation. Doctors and clergy were sent to examine the wounds directly. For Veronica, the investigations became humiliating. Officials reportedly ordered her to conceal the wounds. Some clergy suspected she was self-inflicting the injuries. Others feared the phenomena might have a preternatural or demonic origin. At one point, Veronica was stripped of positions of authority within the convent, while investigators attempted to determine whether the claims were genuine. But despite the skepticism, the story surrounding her only continued to spread. Pilgrims, priests, and curious visitors became increasingly fascinated by the nun in Città di Castello who claimed to physically share in the suffering of Christ. And as the investigations continued, Veronica began writing what would become one of the largest mystical diaries in Christian history. More than 20,000 pages describing visions, ecstasies, temptations, and the violent spiritual experiences she believed were transforming her body itself. By the late 1690s, the convent in Città di Castello had become the center of an escalating controversy. The reports surrounding Veronica were no longer limited to visions and ecstatic episodes. Now there were alleged physical wounds. According to witnesses, the marks on Veronica's body resembled the injuries suffered by Christ during the crucifixion. Wounds on the hands, the feet, and the side. The phenomenon became known as the Stigmata. Today, the term is strongly associated with famous figures like Saint Padre Pio. But in Veronica's time, claims of stigmata were rare, frightening, and highly controversial. Church authorities understood the danger immediately. If the wounds were fraudulent, the scandal could damage the credibility of the Church itself. If they were genuine, investigators believed they might represent one of the most extraordinary mystical cases of the era. So Veronica's body became the object of repeated examination. Clergy and physicians inspected the wounds directly. Church investigators questioned witnesses and documented reports of their finding. And according to historical accounts, the investigations often became deeply adversarial. Some examiners suspected self-inflicted injuries. Others believed the wounds appeared and disappeared in ways difficult to explain naturally. The tension inside the convent grew worse as Veronica's mystical experiences intensified. She claimed to experience visions of Christ placing a crown of thorns upon her head. At times, witnesses said she appeared physically overwhelmed by invisible suffering. Then came another strange claim. Veronica reported that Christ had mystically pierced her heart. The language was symbolic in Catholic spirituality, but Veronica described the experience in intensely physical terms. She believed the suffering of Christ had become impressed not only on her soul, but on her body itself. To modern readers, the accounts can sound disturbing. Even some clergy at the time were uncomfortable with the intensity of her spirituality. But despite years of scrutiny, The investigations never fully discredited her. Instead, the reports surrounding Veronica only became more dramatic as she grew older. And when she finally died in 1727, physicians would reportedly claim to discover something inside her body that seemed connected to those very visions she had described for decades. On July 9, 1727, Veronica Giuliani died inside the convent after years of illness and physical suffering. She was 67 years old. By that point, her name was already known far beyond the walls of the monastery. For decades, church authorities had investigated the strange phenomena surrounding her life. The visions, the ecstasies, and the alleged stigmata, and the increasingly bizarre claims connected to her mystical experiences. Now the woman at the center of the controversy was dead, and within hours, physicians and religious officials gathered around the body to perform an examination. According to the historical records, investigators first observed marks associated with the stigmata on her body. But the most famous part of the examination allegedly came after physicians opened her chest and removed the heart. What happened next would spread across Italy and become one of the most controversial stories connected to any Catholic mystic. According to witnesses and later ecclesiastical accounts, physicians examining the heart reported seeing unusual anatomical formations embedded within the tissue. The shapes allegedly resembled the instruments of Christ's passion: crosses, nails, a spear, and other symbols connected to the crucifixion. The claims quickly became legendary. But more importantly, the reports didn't claim literal miniature metal objects were found inside the organ. Rather, observers described fibrous structures, membranes, and natural formations whose shapes appeared symbolic to those examining them. But in an age deeply shaped by religious imagery and mystical interpretation, the discovery stunned the witnesses. To Veronica's supporters, the findings seemed to confirm what she had claimed throughout her life, that the suffering of Christ had somehow become mystically impressed upon her very body. To skeptics, the reports sounded impossible, and the controversy only intensified after her burial. Because according to later accounts, Veronica's body itself began exhibiting an unusual resistance to decay. Over time, the nun once investigated with suspicion would become one of Italy's most famous incorrupt saints. Years passed after Veronica Giuliani's death, then decades, and according to accounts preserved by the convent and later church sources, something unusual became increasingly difficult for visitors to ignore. The body of the nun buried in Città di Castello did not appear to decompose in the way many expected. As devotion to Veronica spread throughout Italy, pilgrims began traveling to the convent to see her remains for themselves. Eventually, the body was placed inside a glass shrine, where it remains today. To believers, the preservation became further evidence that Veronica's life had been extraordinary. But the appearance of the body was only part of what drew attention. Unlike many incorrupt saints whose stories centered almost entirely on preservation, Veronica's body carried a darker and more unsettling reputation. Visitors were not simply looking at a preserved nun. They were looking at the remains of a woman whose body had allegedly displayed the wounds of Christ, and whose heart had reportedly contained anatomical formations resembling the instruments of the crucifixion itself. Over time, the story surrounding Veronica Giuliani became one of the most famous mystical cases in Catholic history. Her writings alone filled more than 20,000 pages. The investigations into her experience lasted years. Physicians examined her repeatedly during life and after death. And despite centuries of skepticism, debate, and scientific advancement, the mystery surrounding Veronica never completely disappeared. Today, visitors entering the monastery at Monastero delle Cappuccini still find her body resting behind glass nearly 300 years after her death. To skeptics, the The story reflects the intense religious culture of the 17th century and the tendency of witnesses to interpret ambiguous phenomena through a spiritual lens. To believers, Veronica Giuliani represents something far more disturbing and mysterious. A woman whose devotion to the suffering of Christ became so complete that, according to historical accounts, it appeared to leave a physical mark not only upon her body, but within her heart itself. Nearly 300 years after her death, the story of Saint Veronica Giuliani still exists somewhere between religion, medicine, and mystery. Inside a monastery in Italy, her body remains preserved behind glass. Pilgrims continue to visit, and historians continue to debate. And skeptics continue searching for ordinary explanations behind the extraordinary claims that surround her life. But regardless of whether one stands on the supernatural elements of the story, the historical record itself is undeniably strange. A nun investigated repeatedly during her lifetime for alleged mystical phenomena, claims of wounds resembling the crucifixion, an autopsy that reportedly revealed symbolic formations inside the heart, and a body later venerated for resisting normal decay. Few figures in Catholic history combine all those elements into a single case. And perhaps that is why Veronica Giuliani continues to fascinate people centuries later. Because even now, standing before the glass casket in Città di Castello, visitors are left confronting the same question that surrounded her in life. Was Veronica Giuliani simply a deeply troubled religious mystic, shaped by the intense spirituality of her age? Or was something far stranger happening inside that convent? If you found this story interesting, please like the video. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel.